Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. As always, it is Nick here, back with your daily crypto news and analysis. And today we are going to be talking about Ripple and XRP, as well as the vast majority of crypto and finance. And I figured you all got your ticket to the circus show because it is in full effect. So we do see breaking. Janet Yellen says it's now highly likely the US runs out of cash early June. This is a circus. So yeah, I mean, in the US, it's essentially this one massive circus show with all of these clowns, sitting around telling you all nonsense. As we look at what's happening around the US and the overall economy around the US, we know for a fact that these are the types of individuals that are ruining the economy. The Treasury is the biggest, and I mean the largest threat to the US. I've talked about this in past and previous videos many times. This is an individual that does want to print even more money, and I'm talking about astronomical amounts of money. We're talking $18 trillion within the next 7 years. It's ridiculous. But here we have someone that has also been fear-mongering around this debt ceiling. We recently seen her interview on ABC where she was saying that, banks are about to have a massive collapse and the US economy is about to implode if they do not raise this debt ceiling. It's all to get people on board with the idea of like, hey, let's raise the debt ceiling so that we can massively overprint the US dollar yet again for absolute nothing. Every single time that we have to raise the debt ceiling, there's a circus show behind it. It's all to create this media buzz and, make people be extremely fearful. And it's all a play on emotions. But nonetheless, we do see over here, Yellen says it's now highly likely the US out of cash early June. Negotiations have yet to produce debt limits agreement. Goldman Sachs is among those seeing June 8th to the 9th as critical. So yeah, I mean, we're watching this closely. And remember what I said. At the time that we are watching these markets, as we're watching crypto, and we're watching, the stock market, we're also watching the dollar. The dollar is really kind of riding on what happens from here on out with this debt ceiling. If they do raise the debt ceiling, then we will see the US dollar collapse. I've said it, I've mentioned it many times as well. I actually just recently did a video talking about the dollar. This still looks bearish to me. I mean, it still doesn't look, like it's selling me on the fact that it's going to blow past these numbers and continue higher. There's just no way in my mind that I see that. I like this little, step up, but as you do see, we are hitting right around that local resistance spot that I mentioned many times on this channel. And now to me, it looks like it wants to continue going lower. This has been followed by this high, a higher or a lower high, a lower high, and then guess where the lower high will be next? Down here, most likely. So I'm still watching this chart closely. I'm still watching everything closely, but there really isn't nothing riding on this. To me personally, we are still seeing a lot of fear mongering around this. We do see over here, I said fear mongering. I see the White House says the stock market will crash by 45% if the US defaults on its debt. This to me was a big buy signal. I'm focused on what's happening here because, the main reason around all of this is just the dollar. That's all I'm really that's the only reason why I'm focused on this, because guess what? We know that this debt ceiling, there's no limitations on debt. If there was, we wouldn't be at $30 trillion in debt. We wouldn't be looking at what's the next area of, where the debt ceiling will be raised. This is a joke and it's not sustainable. This is why I have been parking my money into digital assets and gold and silver and things like that, because that is what we are focused on. But to me, this is wild that they're fear mongering like this around this debt ceiling. And it's all to create this narrative. What do you see over here? Secretary Janet Yellen, here she is lying to the general public. The U.S. has kept its financial commitments since 1789 by paying its bills on time. Congress has prevented default 78 times. It's essential they do not, they do so again. Listen closely.
And, I would simply say since 1789, the United States has a history of paying its bills on time. That's what the world wants to see. A continued commitment to do that. It's what underlies U.S. Treasury securities as the safest investment on the planet. And it's not an acceptable situation for us to be unable to pay our fees. And,
So, yeah, there she was going on and spewing nonsense when we had many individuals, Warren Davidson himself, saying, not true. 1862, 1933, 1968, 1971. Also, it won't be true if Joe Biden and Chuck Schumer fail to reach a reasonable agreement with the House GOP that prevents default now and at least reduces the risk later. And yeah, there's a big battle going on with this, but what's crazy is the lies that is being spewed by these individuals. Like, for example, here's Wall Street Silver. This is fake. The USA has defaulted multiple times since 1789. The greenback default during the Civil War, Liberty bonds during the 1930s. There have been other instances besides those. And yeah, it's like, it's a constant cycle of nonsense being spewed from these individuals. That's why it's all a circus. And it's all, a circus created to, skew the general public. And it's constantly this endless cycle of nonsense. What do you see over here as well? So you guys probably remember this, going all the way back to March of 2020. This was March 11th. $50 trillion in question after the US Treasury liquidity dries up. So we do see Treasury's liquidity drying up puts $50 trillion in question. Coronavirus-induced market mayhem has pushed so much liquidity out of the US Treasuries that the true value of more than $50 trillion in assets around the globe. So yeah, as we do look at this, this was an article written all the way back in March of 2020. And not even over 3 years later, we already are at that point in time where liquidity has dried up. And the big question is, what's going to happen next? Well, I can tell you what's going to happen next because we actually reported on it recently, going all the way back to March of this year. So we do see Senator Ron Johnson, the Treasury Secretary, was before the Finance Committee talking about President Biden's budget, which would drive that debt up to over $50 trillion. She's either delusional or she's just lying to the American public. Listen closely to this.
What I learned from Janet Yellen is she is detached from reality as the president is. Admiral Mike Mullen back in the 2010-2011 timeframe said the greatest threat to our national security is our debt and deficit. That's when our debt was at $14 trillion. Now it exceeds $32 trillion, and the Treasury Secretary was before the Finance Committee talking about President Biden, which would drive that debt up to over $50 trillion over the 10-year budget window. And she wouldn't even admit that the massive deficit spending was a major contributor. So she's either delusional or she's just lying to the American public.
And during that meeting, they actually already did a view on it. They said within the next 7 years, we will be at $50 trillion in debt following this spending and what we have been doing so far with our spending patterns. It's wild. It's absolutely wild. Now, during all of this, we question what's happening outside of the U.S. We question what's happening with a lot of these central banks too, because the central banks are the ones that are lying to all of us as well. We actually do see over here from Gold Telegraph, breaking news in October of 2008, at the height of the global financial crisis, central banks from across the Western world were involved in the manipulation of key interest rates that was reportedly covered up. Are you surprised? And we do see down here, UK and US regulators were told of a state-led drive to rig interest rates in the 2008 financial crisis, but covered it up, evidence indicates. We actually did see the report over here. The Bank of England, the European Central Bank, 3 other European national central banks as well, and the Federal Reserve Bank of New York are alleged to have manipulated the Libor and Euribor benchmark rates at the peak of the 2008 global financial crisis, according to the BBC. This is insane. It's absolutely insane. But you know what? I don't question anything now. Because after, 2.5 years of the XRP lawsuit with the SEC, look at how much information was uncovered from the XRP community around the SEC and all of the manipulation that ties all the way back to, extremely large elites like BlackRock and so many others. Like, we have seen peak manipulation and corruption of these markets. And it's insane that people are not realizing how corrupt the US government is unless they are just ignoring it. But this has been happening for decades and decades and decades. It's been happening forever. Now, today, more than ever, it's just a lot more noticeable. And those that are actually taking notice, well, guess what? You should see the cracks within the system. You should see what's going to happen next, because right now, outside of the US, a lot of things are moving pretty quickly. Going back 2 days ago, Russia involved in de-dollarization talks with the Islamic world to create independent financial system. This is happening. We do see our relations with the countries of the Islamic world cannot but be influenced by the global shifts that are taking place and the global trends. We are talking about processes of de-dollarization and the creation of an independent financial system. Do you see down here, this broader agenda and how it affects countries and relationships enables us to see the relations between Russia and the Islamic states have a very large and very positive future. The government is doing a lot to ensure future development along these lines. So yeah, I mean, as we do look at what's happening around the world, we are seeing a major pushback against, the SWIFT network and even the US dollar. But you see, in this sense, Russia has been recently seeking the construction of an alternative financial system to let them transact with other countries without relying on SWIFT, the global banking linking system, and the US dollar, as the group of the 7 intends to further restrict Russian access to the financial system. Like, this is the big deal because, if Russia can achieve this, I'm not saying that I'm on Russia's side, but if Russia can achieve this, well, that puts everything into motion around a full-on pushback against the dollar and around the US-based system, if you will, SWIFT. And it does beg the question, like, what's going to happen from here on out? To me personally, I think that payment systems and the financial systems around the world are going to be decentralized. We are going to be seeing a full-on push on a new financial system that is going to be reliant on every single nation's own decisions, meaning, Russia won't have to worry about what the US does, and the US wouldn't have to worry about what this other nation does, because we are going to be held accountable for our own actions, which I think is the best case scenario with what we are seeing around the US, which is a complete circus show of financial integrity. What do you see over here as well? Tomorrow, the governor of Russia's central bank is visiting Iran. She is meeting with the Iranian central bank to sign agreements related to currency and banking. Oh, but maybe we shouldn't focus on this. Maybe we should all go and focus on the debt ceiling, because this is just like a major distraction to me. With how much we have been seeing around this debt ceiling and all of this focus on the debt ceiling, it seems like one big distraction away from things that are actually very important right now with what Russia is doing. I mean, this was 2 days ago. This is now today. Tomorrow we are seeing this, or I should say technically today, we are seeing this meeting happening. Like, big things are happening around the BRICS nations. Remember, recently, the president of Turkey says our country is not at a point where we would impose sanctions on Russia as the West has done. We are not obligated to follow the West sanctions. Turkey has an interest in joining BRICS. Turkey is discussing establishing an international gas trade center and a significant gas hub in Istanbul with Russia. Also tied to this, we did see over here, BRICS membership. A game changer for Saudi Arabia's economy, ? Saudi Arabia has been very, very interested in joining BRICS. Now, what's even wilder around this is Iraq. Ahead of joining BRICS, Iraq issues ban on the US dollar transactions. This happened on May 17th. What's crazy about all of this, right, is that we are seeing the BRICS expand rapidly. We do see it down here, BRICS, 10 Asian countries agreed to ditch the US dollar. 30 countries now ready to accept BRICS currency. Like, the BRICS are becoming a powerhouse around the financial system. Whether or not people want to realize this and, take it seriously, that's fine. You don't need to. But to me, I am taking this serious because as more and more nations outside of the US start to turn and look at BRICS, this is going to put a lot of stress on the US economy. And at a time where the US economy can't really take much more, in my opinion, this is something crucial to watch. And also remember that Iraq and also even Russia and Saudi Arabia are among the top 10 exporters for oil. We scroll down, we could see the list here. Starting at number 10, Norway. And then the rest here are pretty large, but guess what? You have the UAE, you have Iraq. Up here, you have the United States is number 3. Russia is number 2, and number 1 is Saudi Arabia, which is why I've been focused on Saudi Arabia, especially around the petrodollar deal. Once that deal is done, which a lot of people have speculated that it is, guess what? That really sets apart the world from the US, and it begs the question, what really is holding the US dollar to any sort of valuation? Besides it still being technically the world reserve currency. To me personally, something big is coming. A large shift is going to happen, and to me, I've been focused on what the BRICS are doing because Russia is now the number 2 exporter of oil. Number 1 is Saudi Arabia. We know that there's a lot of talks around a deal being made with Saudi Arabia and Russia. Iraq is number 5. Iraq is already working with the BRICS. And a lot of these other nations that are tied to oil exports that are in the top 10 are also in discussions with BRICS around becoming a member. The big question here is, what is the US going to do? What's going to happen from here on out? We are about to see a drastic change of scenery around our entire financial system. And I do think that's going to be centered out on digital assets, crypto, CBDCs, etc. because we are seeing the financial system as we know it change rapidly. And it seems as though it's all centered out on SWIFT alternatives, US dollar alternatives, and this has been streamlined due to what we did do with Russia. All of these nations that are working with Russia, all of these nations that are becoming, members of BRICS, all of them are also tired of the same exact thing that we did with Russia, which is impose sanctions and control the globe through a financial weapon, aka the US dollar. So we will see a new reserve currency. Could it be a decentralized currency? 100%. We will also see new financial system networks outside of the SWIFT traditional system. And it really does beg the question, what's going to happen with crypto? Where does crypto lie in all of this? And I've talked about it many times. I believe that DLT will be the rails for the new financial system. I also believe that CBDCs will be issued out on DLT technology as well. We are about to see something very interesting happen over the next couple years. It's not going to happen instantly, but over the next couple years, we are about to see some very interesting things. And it's all centered out on the fact that the US has destroyed our own economy. The Treasury has been the biggest threat to our financial system for the longest time ever. Same with the Federal Reserve. So with that being said, I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys did, definitely leave a like, subscribe, turn notifications on. If you guys want more free content, you guys are more than welcome to follow me on Twitter and join the free Discord down in the description below. So it's up to you all. Have a beautiful day or a beautiful night, wherever you guys are in this beautiful world. This has been Nick. Peace out, guys.